So now over to Rachel. So Rachel is a City of Fremantle councillor, and today she will be talking about cycleways and how they create community. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Rachel.
Hi, thank you. And I also just want to acknowledge that we meet today on Wajak country and pay respect to elders past and present. As it was mentioned, I'm a City of Fremantle councillor, and I'm also an avid cyclist or bike rider. And in my day job, I work for Green Senator Scott Ludlam on his bike campaign and the Black Spot app, which I'll talk about a little sooner. First of all, I just wanted to get a little bit of an idea of who's in the room in terms of, can you just put your hand up if you ride a bike a lot? Okay, and what about people who maybe don't ride much at all or at all? A couple, okay, awesome. And look, this was partly my intention with this discussion was to try and hit on some of the other issues around cycling that are not often talked about. You know, we hear a lot about all the economic and health benefits of cycling and that sort of thing. And, you know, we kind of get told all this kind of self-righteous information about why we should all be riding bikes, but I wanted to share some stuff that was actually just more about what motivates me and to keep riding a bike. And I actually ended up giving up my car about 5 years ago, and not because I thought I should, but because I realised that it had been sitting in the driveway for 6 months, having only used 1 tank of fuel. It cost me $500 in rego and insurance alone, and I realised that it was a bit of a waste of money really, because I was choosing to ride my bike instead. That didn't happen instantly, it did happen over time, and I'll talk a little bit about how that came to be. So the purpose of my talk today is around why cycling actually helps create community specifically. And this is a picture here of the Light Up the Night ride that was done in Fremantle on Saturday night just recently. And as you can see, a really inclusive event, lots of kids there, lots of families and that sort of thing. One of the many fun things that happen on bikes in Freo. Cycling, it really does improve social inclusion. As we know, cycling is pretty much affordable and accessible to almost everyone. You can do it at any age, and you can do it pretty much anywhere. It helps overcome the growing isolation that's actually occurring in our communities. Not just for the people on bikes, but the people that we pass by. I have this ongoing dialogue with neighbours around the corner from my house, an elderly couple who like to sit on their front porch every day, pretty much all day. And we have this fun little game that's now happening where they'll shout out to me as I go past and make a running commentary on the speed that I'm travelling or what I'm wearing as I ride down the road or which bike I happen to be riding that day. Their English isn't great, but I often stop and say hello, and it brightens both of our days just by being able to have this social interaction that goes on. So you get to meet your neighbours, definitely get to sort of say hi to people as you pass. And even people that you know, like I often see people as I pass by and I can really easily stop and have a chat to them, or I can just sing out as I cruise past, and wave at each other, say hello, that sort of thing. Little chats with other cyclists at the traffic lights is also something I really enjoy. This is not something that happens when you're in a car, it just isn't possible, and it's one of the things that I find brings me a lot of happiness. It's also been great passive surveillance. There's been a few instances where I've been able to observe what's going on as I travel through a quiet community. For example, I was passing by a friend's place and I could hear a dog yelping out. It sounded like it was in distress, so I was able to get off my bike and actually go and have a look and make sure he was okay. Turns out he was just lonely and wanted a pat, but you can't, again, you don't notice that in a car. I also inadvertently spooked some prowlers who were snooping around the local school near my place. They saw me cruising past, they saw that I was observing what they were doing, and they hightailed it out of there. So it can really have some very positive, unexpected benefits for the community as a whole. If you're a regular bike rider, you can also learn lots of new skills. As I said, like I've built up my fitness over years of riding. I remember I used to live just behind Clontarf Hill, and I had this big hill to travel over in order to get to the bike path along South Beach and into Fremantle. And I can remember when I first started out, I used to have to push my bike up the hill, and now I live on one of the biggest hills in Fremantle and I can make it up easily. So it doesn't happen quickly, but it does eventually happen, and all these challenges give me a great sense of achievement as I start to overcome them. Similarly, I can now ride my bike from Perth to Fremantle and back with relative ease, and at a speed that actually does compete with the trains themselves. If you actually incorporate having to wait for the train to actually arrive and so on, I can make it in almost just as good a time by bike. Again, this is something that's happened over time. One of the advantages with riding along the train line is if it all gets too much, then you can just jump on the train, which is fantastic. So you can learn bit by bit, build up your strength, and again get that sense of achievement. Also being able to learn lots of skills on how to look after your bike, how to fix a flat tyre, how to actually tweak your bike in order to make it reflect your personality more, and so on. One of my favourite bikes that I own is a gorgeous custom build single speed that I put together through recycled parts, and my bike mechanic and I actually built it together. And in doing that, I learned how a bike works. I learned about the mechanisms within it, and that was a really great skill for me to learn. Now I can actually do adjustments and repairs and things on my bike myself, and again that's something that saves me money and gives me a great sense of achievement. Kids used to ride a bike to school a lot. I personally grew up walking and riding a bike to school, and it happens so much less often these days, which is a bit of a sad thing, because in riding to school, kids build up their confidence, they build up their resilience, and they get that sense of achievement and trust in that their parents have put in them to be able to make their own way. It also teaches kids about how to orientate themselves around their community, find their way home and that sort of thing. All really good lifelong skills for young people to have. So we should definitely be encouraging more kids to get on bikes and stay on bikes longer. This is the Boombox bike. This was another bike week event that happened this week. This is these guys do this quite regularly. They are part of the bike mashup crew, and they regularly hold parties around Fremantle. This is an incredible contraption they've made, which is actually a mobile stage that is moved around by bicycle. There's actually 3 parts to it, and they all join together to make a full stage where a full band can actually play live. There is a video link there, but I'm not going to try and make it work. But basically it's quite an impressive sight when there's a live band travelling around through the streets of Fremantle with 3 cyclists kind of powering them along. These parties have been great creative social opportunities in our community that have emerged by people's passion for riding bikes. There's also things like a mobile art installation where they actually have a giant canvas on wheels that gets ported around from location to location, and artists actually create artwork along the journey of these parties. Again, wonderful ways of getting to know people in your community and creative outputs that are all based around bikes. A lot of the time, and particularly being a councillor, I often find that businesses and other locals feel they don't want to actually allow to give up to parking for cycle parking, bike parking, or bike lanes. However, they're not acknowledging the economic benefits of people on bikes. People on bikes are much more likely to shop locally. While we don't necessarily buy as much, you don't do a big weekly shop on a bicycle, but instead you go to your local shop, every day, every second day, and you pick up what you need. One of the advantages of this is also that you end up buying exactly what you feel like eating that day, and your veggies are always fresh. So there's lots of data and stats out there on the economic benefits of cycling, and the fact that if you give over 1 parking bay to 4 bike bays, you'll actually quadruple the amount of turnover in your shop as a result of that. And slowly people are starting to acknowledge that, and slowly in Fremantle we're starting to get businesses actually ask for bike parking to be put in front of their shop in order to, and even at the expense of a car parking bay. We've also seen a real emergence of local cycling economy. We've got a boom in bike shops down in Freo, and lots of young entrepreneurs who are actually starting up their own small businesses with some specialty kind of bike shops, people who actually focus on different styles of bikes and things, and actually creating a whole new economy in Fremantle that's doing quite well. And of course it's not unique to Freo. For me, one of the biggest motivators is the joy that it brings me. I love the feeling of freedom. I like having no parking hassles, no fuel costs. I like not being stuck in traffic jams and being able to cruise straight past all the cars that are lined up at lights. I can go anywhere, anytime I want. I don't have to wait for a taxi. I don't have to rely on public transport timetables. I just go where I want, when I want. The adrenaline and the exhilaration I also feel when I'm getting around on bike and I'm banging it somewhere exciting, and the blood's all pumping and wind's in my hair, actually gives me such joy. I have been known to sing and I have been known to wee, like woo, down hills and that sort of thing. And one of the funniest things is I'm not the only one. Sometimes I will pass other cyclists who are also singing to themselves. It just seems to create that kind of vibe. But I do acknowledge there are barriers to getting more people on bikes, and some of them are perceived and some of them are real. I'm going to talk about some of them now. One of the most common ones is what to wear. Now personally, I don't wear lycra ever. I've never bought myself those things that people normally wear when you see them on bikes. I wear work clothes, I wear party frocks, I wear fancy dress. I wear high heels when riding. In fact, if I'm wearing high heels, I would rather be riding a bike than walking because, quite frankly, it's easier. So I really want to encourage people not to think that they need to wear something in particular and therefore they don't want to get on a bicycle. I personally am going to ride home to Fremantle this afternoon. I'm looking forward to it and I will be wearing this. So it's possible, it's not that hard. My little tip is skinny pants are better than wide leg pants, and if you actually have the boy bar, it keeps your skirt out of the chain. So that's what I've learned. A couple of the other things is the heat. Obviously, when it's hot, it's harder to get around by bike. It's one of those things that does become a deterrent. However, again, I ride in all kinds of weather, and even 35+ degrees days are actually manageable. The reality is you're going to be hot no matter what you're doing, and when you're on your bike you create a little bit of a breeze and you sweat and it comes off and it's not too bad. Rain is my enemy. I do hate the rain because I end up getting very wet, but I bought myself a really good set of wet weather gear. I've got some mud guards and you can manage. My housemates like to say there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. So you just have to plan. And that's the key to getting around by bike more often, is actually around planning. For me, it's around making sure you allow enough time. It does take a slightly different level of, you'll choose a different route, it'll take a different amount of time to your car, but if you actually accommodate that into your life, you get all the benefits. Safety is one of the biggest concerns in terms of people getting on bikes more often, and it is a really valid one. Personally, I've been hit by a car twice, so it does happen. But one of the keys to actually making cycling safer is to have more people on bikes. When you have more people on bikes, it means it's more likely that the driver in the car is actually also a person who rides a bike. So they're aware and cognizant of what you're doing. It also means when people see more cyclists around on the road, they're actually more likely to be aware of them and more likely to accommodate them. So the more people we actually get out on bikes, the safer it is for all of us. Some of the keys are about being assertive, sensible, predictable, and visible. You want cars to actually see you and you want them to know what you're doing. So some of the worst sort of things that can happen, and particularly among novice riders, is to hug the curb and then come out around cars and that sort of thing, thinking that they're staying safe away from the traffic. However, the reality is that creates uncertainty for drivers, and it's actually far better that you actually claim the lane or stay at a constant kind of rate, at a constant kind of different distance from the cars, so that they can actually predict where you're going and work around it, and then it works for everybody. Obeying road rules is also really important. Again, you need to be predictable and you need to not give other bike riders a bad name. So running red lights and doing the kind of things that sometimes get in trouble definitely should be avoided. But again, the best thing that we can do is get more people on bikes, and in order to do that, we do need to make cycling safer. We need proper dedicated lanes, we need proper infrastructure that keeps people safe while on bicycles. In the City of Fremantle, I'm really pleased that we've actually increased our bike budget massively. When Mayor Brad Pettit first became mayor, we were spending $50,000 a year on cycling infrastructure. Since 2013, we've spent $2.2 million, and it's made a world of difference. In that time, 46% more people, there's been a 46% increase in the number of people on bikes in Fremantle. We've got bike counters, and we've been able to measure the difference that it's made. One of the key notable differences is that about 40% of those people on bikes are women. Now that's always considered a signal of good bike infrastructure, because women tend to be more risk adverse than men, and if you've got lots of women on bikes, then you know that you're doing the right thing. Fremantle has also doubled the number of bike parking racks in the city, and when it's busy periods, we actually see that they are full to overflowing. This enables more people to visit our local businesses, attractions and facilities without actually adding to the pressure of car parking. We've also been involved in doing a number of innovative trials. We've got a couple of these counterflow bike lanes so that bikes can actually head the other direction. Sorry.
How many people there?
Sorry, old campaign photos. And Brad, with our armadillos, which have been introduced first in Fremantle and now are actually on Barrack Street as well. And we've introduced the BAS symbols, Bicycle Awareness Zone markings, and these are throughout the CBD and areas where it's relatively low speeds, busy environments, and it's actually just a constant reminder to cars that people on bikes are actually here as well, and that they're allowed to be here, and that there's not enough room for a bike lane, and they can take the lane. As I said, I work for Senator Scott Ludlam, and I've been involved in the bike vision work that we've been doing. This is a really comprehensive plan for basically creating a massive network of bike lanes and some principles about how we actually go about doing that throughout Perth. The Greens maintain that we should invest the kind of money that in cycling infrastructure that reflects our target mode share. Now that's the percentage of people who are actually riding their bike for regular purposes. And at the moment, our mode share target for people on bikes is 3%. So we argue that 3% of the transport budget should be spent on cycling infrastructure in order to meet that target. In 2015-16, that would equate to $44.7 million. Now the WA government has been doing quite well. They've very proudly allocated $75.1 million over 4 years to improve cycling safety throughout Perth. This includes $34.4 million for major cycling projects associated with roads, major roads, and $3 million for the Bike Boulevards program. However, this leaves just $37.7 million over 4 years for local government grants and principal shared paths. That equates to just $9.4 million a year for priority bike infrastructure across the state. That actually means we've gone backwards, not only in real terms, but in dollar figures as well. The Greens are also calling for Commonwealth investment in cycling. We have a fully costed policy initiative that will contribute $80 million towards cycling infrastructure nationally, which would equate to $8 million for Western Australia. Since 2012, an additional 23.4 kilometres of principal shared paths have been constructed. Another 49.6 kilometres is programmed and funded up until 2019. This is a really good effort and definitely worthy of congratulating them on. However, it does leave another 135.35 kilometres of PSP that is unfunded but in the plans going forward. Significant increases in funding are going to be needed if we are actually going to complete our bike network within a reasonable time frame. Many local bike connections are actually delivered through local governments, which are funded 50% from the state government through the Perth Bike Network grants. From this, 55.7 kilometres of new paths have been funded since 2012-13, and a further 4.9 kilometres of existing paths have actually been upgraded. The state contributed $6.68 million towards the cost of these new paths through the PBN grants program. However, these grants are often given prior to the detailed design and main roads approval, and combined with changing local government priorities mean that some of these projects actually never eventuate, or that funding is switched to other projects. So there's currently actually no way of knowing what actually ends up on the ground, which undermines our efficacy of, I can't say that word at this moment, of the network, as well as the reporting on the progress of cycling infrastructure. Here's an example in Fremantle where we created a new bike path along Carrington Street in Hilton, which was much needed, except the project that was actually funded was on Hampton Road, and that never happened. So as you can see, it just means that the accountability and the reporting on this sort of stuff becomes very hard to monitor. In 2015, the Auditor General's report on cycling found that there was poor and inconsistent maintenance of existing cycling infrastructure, and also inconsistency with the delivery of bike infrastructure. There was varied widths, surface treatments, and quality varied, which is detailed in their reporting. Both the Auditor General's report and the Greens Bike Vision recommend that guidelines and training are provided for local government in order to deliver consistent safe cycling treatments. But most of all, we need more funding for bike infrastructure, and the Greens think it should be 3%. The WA Auditor General also found that an electronic reporting mechanism should be introduced. Now in 2012, we created the Bike Black Spot app in order to serve this function. Since then, hundreds of hazards have been reported. And thankfully, since then, there's some good news. Some improvements that have been made to areas that have been reported using the Bike Black Spot include the bike lanes on Barrack Street through the CBD, which now include the physical separation and the armadillos, and even have traffic signals that prioritise people on bikes and allow them a head start ahead of the traffic. Beach Street in Fremantle was one of the bad ones, and it was a blind corner with a bike path that just stopped and didn't go anywhere, then forced you to cross the road on a blind corner, which was a real problem. That has now been fixed. Also the PSP, which was in the earlier picture, was another spot that had often been reported. And it's great news that it actually now gets you from the Perth Arena all the way to Grant Street Station, and there are plans going forward to actually complete that all the way to Queen Victoria Station. However, they still are not committing to get it all the way to Fremantle on this busy and popular route. There are also many other black spots that still pose a risk. So I encourage you, I've brought some cards along, and I encourage you to take some of these, share them around, download the Bike Black Spot app on your phone. We've actually now created an Android version as well as an iPhone version, and we've updated and refreshed the entire app, so we're reporting new data, and we're actually able to, the way it works is that you take a photo, it locates you using your GPS, and it sends whatever message you want to send to the Transport Minister, which helps us build the case for why there needs to be more funding. It goes to both the state and federal transport ministers and helps us build the case. If we actually achieve this, if we can actually get more cycling infrastructure funded through both state and federal level and get more commitment from more local governments to follow the lead of the City of Fremantle, then I hope that more people will be able to share the joy and convenience that I experience every day. Now I'll open it up for questions and discussions. Yes.
I'm such a local, and often when we buy in home, we spend so much money on building bike paths, which are separate from the road, and I find they're very dangerous, because to me, if I ride the bike all like this, on a bike path I come up to roads, and there's cars going across. The moment I stop, and the cars won't give way to me, and I feel I've got right away because I'm going in a straight line, and I've had some terrible arguments with motorists because I want them to give way. Whereas if you put the bike path actually on the road, then you don't have to stop, so you keep that nice clean straight. And I would have thought that would be cheaper.
Look, it is cheaper, and there are arguments both ways. I do understand the point you're making, and I mean, I think that's where the PSPs are particularly good in the sense that they generally don't actually interact with the crossroads very much. You know, you think about the ones that are along the railway line in particular, and you've got bridges that follow the rail line, and you know, you actually overshoot the traffic as well, and that's certainly the ideal scenario. There are some guidelines around when you do and don't put bike paths on the roads, and generally it's around the speed of the traffic and the volume of the traffic. You need physical separation from traffic in order to be truly safe, unless you've got slow traffic basically, and I think the safety is sort of paramount, and so even if it means having to stop occasionally at a crossroad, I think it's a better scenario that's actually more likely to get more people using it, because while you and I might feel comfortable sharing the road with a car and being one of those road warrior type cyclists, there are lots and lots of people who just won't even entertain that, and I mean particularly people with children, and that's what we need to do, is we need to make sure that it's usable by everyone, and that means making it as safe as possible. And physical full separation is the key to that.
Randomised bike cyclists should have right of way. Because he's the one that the car should stop on that side of the cycle.
It's a valid point, but I think you need completely different types of signalling and treatment and so on in order to do that, and I think we've got a long way to go before getting there, but perhaps one day we will. I mean, you can just imagine if you're coming at a cross section and you're kind of tucked back from the main road, the driver's likely not even going to see you until you're waiting at the corner. So, you know, there's lots of issues that would need to be considered to make that statement. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I was just wondering about this black spot cap.
Yes.
The inks and everything goes to the transport ministers. Does it go to the greens as well?
Yes.
So you can collate it?
It does, yes, that's right.
The transport ministers may do nothing with it.
Yes. No, absolutely. So basically it goes to the Green State MP who's responsible for transport. So in WA that's Lynn McLaren. It actually works all the way around the country, so it'll go to the relevant state minister wherever you are. And it also goes to Scott and Janet Rice, who are the two Green senators who are working on this issue at the federal level. So as well as the actual ministers, it does go to the Greens as well. And we use it in our advocacy. So you might have seen there was a story in the paper on Monday where, again, we were able to provide an update on what we're finding with the Black Spot app and so on, and we use it for kind of consistent public debate. We've actually had some really great collaborations with people who have used it. I mean, it was a tragedy really, because there was a guy called Travis Dean who used, you know Travis? Okay, so he'd made a Black Spot app report about a dangerous underpass near Mounts Bay Road and the Narrows Bridge. And then 12 months later, he had the accident that he was actually imagining was possible, and he damaged his hands very badly. And he contacted us to tell us about that. And we were able to write a letter to the minister and say, what are you going to do about this? We got Travis on the radio. We were able to use his terrible, sad story to actually apply further pressure. And so we do collaborate with people who actually make the reports so that we can kind of keep the pressure on the government about this.
Is that the intersection where head accident? Is that coming off the Mounts Bay Road path and crossing over the freeway on ramps and then going on to the Narrows?
Yeah. And there's that lake and so on. Yeah, the Mount Hospital.
But I hate that. I do that all the time. I despise that.
Yeah.
The traffic's all trying to, get up to speed.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's ridiculous.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any other questions, comment, discussion? Yes.
That leads to how do we get governments to properly value cycling, because clearly $1 billion spent on cycling will produce all kinds of general savings in health and environment and all kinds of things on local business and tourism. Whereas $1 million on cars will cost even more with no benefits.
Yeah. No, look, you're absolutely right, and I suppose it's just about achievable goals and like kind of stepping up towards that. Certainly in the work that we do in the report that I'm updating the bike vision at the moment, and there is all that stuff around the costs of congestion, as well as the health costs and all that kind of stuff that actually need to be considered when you actually make those value judgments and so on. But given how low it is at the moment, I mean, if we could just get them up to 3%, we'd be, you know, miles and miles ahead. And we don't think it's solely up to the state government. I mean, as I said, the federal government should be putting in money because this is major infrastructure for our cities and productivity and all that sort of stuff as well. And also local governments. I mean, they do play a really vital role, and I think there's a measure of, I'm not sure how this was come to, but the idea that $7 per resident or ratepayer or whatever should be spent on cycling infrastructure by local government, and that was sort of an estimate that sort of reflected the kind of level of infrastructure for that level of community, so depending on how big or small and that sort of stuff. I mean, in Fremantle we're spending like $40 per ratepayer, so we're basically playing catch up in the way that you're suggesting, recognising that it's been underfunded for so long. We just need a really big cash injection now, sort out the problem, get some really good infrastructure up and running, and then we can actually start paring it back and just making sure that we maintain it all well.
To educate federal politicians, could you do a really simple message maybe, like look at all of the benefits and costs? You go, every dollar on cars costs $5, and every dollar on cycling costs, makes $20.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's study. Then they go, oh, that makes more sense.
Well, absolutely, and I mean also, so during the stimulus package that was negotiated in whatever it was, 2008-9 in the financial crisis, the Greens actually got $40 million out of the feds for cycling through that, and there was an analysis done of it afterwards that actually showed the flow-on benefits in terms of the number of permanent jobs created, the number of temporary jobs created, and the kind of economic activity that they were looking to achieve through the stimulus package was well and truly met, and the numbers were actually far better than the infrastructure projects around roads. They actually got a much better cost-benefit ratio for the cycling stuff. So those cases have been made and continue to be made, so hopefully we'll get there.
You were talking about local governments and how I thought you were saying something that you were trying to get some sort of consistency across local governments in regards to the bike paths and where they put them and how they do them and stuff like that. Have those guidelines been developed, or is anything happening with that yet?
No, I mean, again, that was an issue that was highlighted in the report from the Auditor General, which only came out late last year, in October last year, so hopefully it's starting to seep through. It's interesting because having been, like, we have a very hands-on approach with our staff who deliver the bike infrastructure, and so I really do understand the challenges with that, because we will recognise that we need a bike path along a certain route, and there'll be a number of ways you can actually approach it, and you have to weigh up so many different considerations, and sometimes near enough needs to be good enough because it's all you're going to get, and so it is a real challenge, you know. Yeah, on both sides.
So, for instance, on Scarborough Beach Road recently, they blocked off one lane of traffic for a whole heap of time while they were just redoing the curb. But they didn't add another bike path. There was just so much of a wasted opportunity there, you know what I mean? And I know it probably comes down to funding, but it's just, you can't get the rest of it.
Well, that's it, and that's where it needs to be around prioritising that sort of stuff, and we've certainly encouraged our staff at Freo to always be thinking about the cyclist's need whenever they're looking at an infrastructure project. And I mean, you know, things like roundabouts are a classic case of terrible situation for cyclists, and so now we've got a fairly consistent approach that's a halfway measure, but at least something, which is around, you know, really clearly kind of showing the bike lanes feeding into the traffic. You know, where normally you actually have the dot into the curb, and it's just kind of like, what am I supposed to do here? And instead we're trying to go dot, like, okay, bikes are now merging with cars, and cars need to be aware of that, and then trying to put like the BAS symbol where we can, you know, so just sort of say, you're going to have cyclists in the middle of the road sometimes here, and be on the lookout.
And I guess the thing is if you see something with your local council, ring them up and say, hey, I noticed this, why did you consider these? Make a noise about it until, you know, they start to get the message that people
absolutely, and we've got the Fremantle Bicycle Users Group, which is a really, really useful group in terms of, you know, being an advocacy group that actually engages with our staff regularly, and they kind of say, and it's not even so much critiquing after the fact, but it's kind of, they get a little bit of an update on what kind of works we've got in the pipeline. They can actually feed back and say, hey, here's what we think is needed for the future when you're planning your next round of funding requests and that sort of stuff. And so getting together with other people in your neighbourhood to actually be that ongoing dialogue with the council is really, really useful. Most of them are open to it, I think.
I've got a problem with drains next to the curb.
Yeah.
Stirling Council has put up, in 2010, put up a thing with the council saying they need a policy of having crosshatch, building drains, crosshatch. There's one outside the driveway that you can go to the newspapers in Hazel Road. It's been like that since 1997, and they still haven't fixed it. All of these are some of the real vast crossings.
Yeah, well, it's hard, and like particularly when they're not flush, because you end up going around and you come very close to cars and so on, and it's frightening.
Most of them are lined up so that your wheel goes down.
Yeah.
The councils don't have a consistent policy on not putting old drains back, because oh yeah, you've got some of those down the back of the shed.
Yeah.
The other thing they could do is roll up some of the ones that got down the back of the shed, just go around and replace them. The ones they replace, they can put crosshatches on those.
Yeah.
But they won't do it because none of the councillors ride bicycles.
That's a challenge, and look, I mean, that's where we're really lucky in Freeloos. About half of us are regular, like constant cyclists and so on. In fact, when there's a council meeting, the biggest problem we have is you can't actually get in the door to the fire exit where we all park our bikes because there's about 8 of them. So yeah, look, it does help to have people on your council that ride bikes. You know, the best you can do is again set up a bug and just start hassling them, and also encouraging them to come out and go for a ride. We actually take our staff out for bike rides occasionally, and it's just like, okay, I want you to come and check out this spot and see how it feels. And sure enough, they see what the people on bikes actually have to deal with, and then they go and rectify that. But look, I do want to just finish up on a positive in particular, because what I really felt like I wanted to contribute to the broader discussion around riding bikes at the moment is trying to encourage more people to get onto bikes. And there is always so much of those concerns and complaints and worries about safety or fights with cars and those sort of things. And what I really wanted to do is, particularly when, because I know that most of the people here are regular cyclists, but is to also share the good stuff, to share the things that actually brings joy and motivates you to keep getting on your bike, because realistically that's going to be the most persuasive thing you can do at all to get more people on bikes. And then just finally, I will remind you, Bike Black Spot app, please download it, please start using it. It's really, really helpful to help build our case. And I also brought some fun badges that you can take if you want one.
Thank you.
Thank you.